Hello students and welcome to my online lecture series in biology. So herein I'll be providing you with easy learning for understanding complex concepts in biology. So in my today's class, we'll be discussing about gene interactions and what are the different types of genetic interactions that you'll be coming across here. So let us begin with today's class by understanding firstly, what are gene interactions? So basically when the expression of one particular gene is influenced by the presence or absence of any other particular gene, then such kind of interactions are said to be gene interactions. So mere presence or absence of another gene is going to influence the expression of the other gene. So such interactions are said to be gene interactions. Now, my interacting genes, they may be either present on the same loci on the chromosome or they may be present on different loci of different chromosomes. So depending on the position of these genes, the interactions are of two types. They are classified into two categories. So these are the allelic interactions and the non-allelic interactions. So let us understand what are allelic interactions first. So these genetic interactions that take place between alleles of a single gene, they are said to be as the allelic interactions, or you can also call them as intra-allelic interactions. So we all know that for a single gene, you have two allelomorphs or two alleles. So when these two alleles are said to interact with each other, then such kind of interactions are said to be as allelic interactions or the intra-allelic interactions, interactions between the alleles of the single gene. Then the other set of interactions that we have are the non-allelic interactions. So these interactions are basically taking place between two or more different alleles that belong to two different genes, two or more different genes, and these genes, they are present on separate loci or different loci. So all these alleles present on separate loci, they are said to interact with each other, and upon their interaction, only a single phenotype is produced. So such kind of interactions are said to be as non-allelic interactions or inter-allelic interactions. So remember, such non-allelic interactions, they take place between alleles or genes that are always present on different loci. So let us go through different types of interactions, gene interactions taking place. So the first of them that we are going to study is the lethal genes. So what do you mean by lethal genes? So the word lethal means fatal or decremental. So a gene or an allele whose mere presence is going to cause the death of the possessor is called as a lethal gene. So the person or an individual who is going to harbor one such particular lethal gene is going to undergo death. So lethal genes are said to be fatal. They are said to be decremental, but only and only when they are going to come in specific combinations. So these specific combinations are said to be your homozygous combinations. So when my lethal allele is going to be present in a homozygous combination, then only it is going to cause the death of the person or the death of the bearer. So let us study an example of lethal genes. So a very famous example is that of sickle cell anemia in humans. Now, you all must be very well aware that sickle cell anemia is a genetic disorder and it is caused due to a simple mutation in a normal healthy gene HbA. So this HbA gene is responsible for encoding the beta globin chain of hemoglobin. So under normal conditions, HbA is going to code for the hemoglobin protein. But upon mutation, this HbA gene gets converted into a mutated form called the HbS gene. So this HbS gene is responsible for forming an abnormal hemoglobin protein. So this HbS gene is said to be a lethal gene, and only when HbS is going to be present in a homozygous state, it is going to be completely fatal for the person who is going to possess the HbS gene. So there are different cases. So let us understand one of the case where the HbS gene is present in the homozygous state. So therefore, the genotype of the individual is going to be HbS. So this is a homozygous state of the HbS lethal gene. And once the person has such a kind of phenotype, then the person is going to die because of fatal anemia. Now, the other case is that of the heterozygous state. So if the person is not homozygous and instead he or she is heterozygous for the lethal gene, so HbS and HbA shall be the genotype of the individual. So in such case, the individual is not going to die. Instead, the individual is going to show mild signs and symptoms of anemia. The person is not going to show any fatality, but for lifelong, he is going to show symptoms of anemia. So such persons or individuals are said to be carriers because they carry the lethal gene lifelong. And these individuals are called as carriers, and they show mild signs and symptoms of anemia. How? So what are these signs and symptoms? So in these particular individuals, their RBCs, they tend to become sickle shaped. So these sickle shaped RBCs are formed due to an oxygen deficiency that is faced by the hemoglobin. Normal hemoglobin has a very good capacity of carrying oxygen. But once the abnormal hemoglobin is produced due to HbS mutated form, the oxygen carrying capacity of the hemoglobin is reduced, and therefore the RBCs, they tend to become sickle shaped. So now what if such two sickle cell carriers, they marry each other? Then in that case, I have carrier 1 and it marries another carrier 2. So in that case, upon marriage, the individuals that you get are of three different types. So the first that you get is a normal individual that is carrying the genotype HbA. So this is a simple cross multiplication between the two genotypes. So HbA with HbA, so you're getting a normal genotype, and therefore the person is going to show a normal phenotype. The other type is carriers, so HbA crossed with another HbS, again HbA crossed with another HbS. So here you're getting two carriers which are going to show mild signs and symptoms of anemia. And the third type you get is the HbS crossed with HbS. So the two gametes, HbS and HbS, they cross with each other, and therefore the genotype of the individual is going to be homozygous for my lethal allele. So this individual is going to be fatal, and he is going to die with fatal anemia. Therefore, the ratio of the offsprings that you get is going to be 1:1, where 1 is normal and 2 are carriers, while the last one is immediately going to undergo death. So for lethal genes, the phenotypic ratio is always going to be 1:2. Let us understand another example, and that is of the creeper fowls or the chickens. So these creeper fowls, they tend to possess a lethal gene denoted by capital C. So when this lethal gene is present, the fowls, they show skeletal abnormality. So what do you mean by skeletal abnormality is that these creeper fowls, they show crooked legs, and they are of very less important economic value. So therefore these creepers, they are of no importance to us. Now remember that these creepers are said to be heterozygous and they are living. So the heterozygous condition is denoted by capital C and small c, where the capital C is going to be my lethal allele. Now if this lethal allele is present in the homozygous combination, then it is going to be fatal, and the chicken is immediately going to die in the embryonic state itself. So the heterozygous individuals, they are living, and therefore they are said to be creepers with crooked legs, while the homozygous individuals are immediately going to undergo death. So now if two such creepers are mated with each other, so I have creeper 1 mating with creeper 2. So the progeny that I'm going to get again are of three different types. So first is going to be a normal individual. So here you see small c, a homozygous recessive condition, and this is going to be a normal chicken and not a creeper one. So normal chicken with very high economic value. The second type we are going to get again two creepers. These creepers, they are going to show crooked legs, skeletal abnormality, and are of less value. And the third one that you get is a homozygous dominant genotype, and that is going to be fatal because the lethal gene is present in homozygous dominant condition. So again, once again, you see that the ratio, the phenotypic ratio that you obtain in the F2 generation, F1 generation is 1:2, because the fatal individual is again going to die. So always remember that for lethal genes, the phenotypic ratio is always going to be 1:2. So this was all about the lethal genes, and you have to remember, students, that the ratio, the phenotypic ratio is going to be 1:2, or you can also label it as 2:1. Then the next interaction that we are going to study is the complementary genes. So let us see, what do you mean by complementary genes, and how are these genes said to be complementary, or how do they show this complementarity? So complementary genes are said to be two pairs of genes. Now again, these complementary genes, they are said to be non-allelic genes because they are present on separate gene loci. So these complementary genes are two sets of dominant genes that are present on separate gene loci, such that these genes, they interact with each other to produce one single phenotype or phenotypic trait. Now the condition is that now if either of them is present alone, so out of these two genes, only if one of them is present, then the phenotypic trait will not be produced in the absence of the other. So here the line says that if either of them is present alone, so either of the dominant genes if present alone, the phenotypic trait will not be produced in the absence of the other. Okay, so if both of them are present together, then only the phenotypic trait will be produced. If either of them is absent, no phenotypic trait is produced. So now both these gene pairs that are present on separate loci, they must represent at least one dominant allele. So if at least one dominant allele is expressed, then and then only the phenotype will be expressed. So let us understand complementary genes with the help of an example for better understanding. So an example of complementary genes is deaf mutism in man. So in man, the deaf mutism is under control of two hypothetical gene pairs. So consider that the gene pairs that I've represented here is capital A small a, that is one gene pair present on one gene locus, and the other gene pair present on a separate gene locus is capital B small b. So these are the two gene pairs which are going to control deaf mutism in man. So out of these two gene pairs, capital A and capital B are the two dominant alleles, and they are said to be complementary. So they are going to show complementary relationship. So if A and B are present together, then the phenotype will be expressed. And if either A or B is absent, then the phenotype will not be expressed. So that is the whole idea behind complementary genes. So let us go understand a few of the cases. So now case number one, where both the dominant alleles capital A and capital B are present. Say for example, the genotype is either of these two cases where capital A and capital B, both of them are present. So therefore, the individual that is going to be observed is a normal, healthy individual. So if this is the genotype, then the phenotype is going to be normal, where both A and B are present together and both of them are showing a complementary relationship. So the individual is going to be a normal person. Now let us understand case number two. Now if from A and B, if either of them is only present, both of them are not present, but only one of the dominant allele is present. So the case for the genotype, for example, can be either capital A is present or either only capital B is present. So if that is the case, the complementarity relationship is broken, and therefore the individual is going to be deaf mute. The phenotype is always going to be deaf mute, and the phenotypic trait is not expressed. So the normal individual is not going to be formed, and the individual instead will be deaf and mute, because both A and B are always contributing for normal phenotype. If either of them is absent, then the individual is going to be deaf mute. Now the third case is there where neither A nor B are present together. So the case is, for example, the recessive genotype, double recessive homozygous genotype. So neither capital A is present nor capital B is present. So definitely the individual is going to be deaf mute. So it was pretty much simple to understand. Now let us see if two such deaf mute individuals, they marry each other. So marriage between two such deaf mute individuals. So I have a deaf mute individual over here. It has only capital A dominant allele contributing. The second is another deaf mute individual in which I have only capital B contributing. So now if two such deaf mute individuals are crossed with each other, then the F1 hybrid that you get in the first generation is a heterozygous individual. So this is a heterozygous individual for both my gene pairs. So it is heterozygous for both capital A as well as capital B. So this is called as the F1 generation. Now, if two such F1 hybrids are crossed with each other, then such a phenomenon is called as the self-crossing. So if self-crossing is taking place between two such F1 hybrids, then the next generation that you get is called as the F2 generation, or the second filial generation. So now when two such F1 hybrids are crossed with each other, then you get four types of gametes. So for example, one of the 4 types of gametes that you get is from this first F1 individual. So here you get 4 types of gametes. So here you see the gametes that you observe in this particular row are from the F1 hybrid number 1. So I have 4 different types of gametes produced by this F1 hybrid. Then here in these particular rows, the F1 hybrids that you've got, the gametes that you've got, they are from the second F1 hybrid. So F1 hybrid number 1 is crossed with the F1 hybrid number 2. So here I am going to get 16 combinations of different genotypes. So now you see that this is a Punnett square which is ready, and 16 combinations of genotypes that you have got. Now all these genotypes you see are color coded. So what is this color coding scheme? So the red colored boxes that you see are normal individuals, while the yellow colored boxes that you see are the deaf mute individuals. So now the phenotypic ratio that you obtain in the F2 generation is 9 normal healthy is to 7 deaf mute. So here you see that in the red colored boxes, you see that both the dominant alleles, capital A as well as capital B, are present together. And therefore, both these dominant alleles are interacting and they are producing a normal individual. On the contrary, if you see these other yellow colored boxes, in all these yellow colored boxes, either only capital A is present or either only capital B is present. So therefore, the complementary relationship is broken and therefore the individual is said to be deaf mute. In this particular case also, you see that neither capital A is present nor capital B is present. So therefore, the individual definitely has to be deaf mute. And therefore, the phenotypic ratio that you obtain in the F2 generation is 9 normal is to 7 deaf mute. So always remember that for complementary genes, the phenotypic ratio you obtain in the F2 generation is always and always going to be 9 is to 7. Remember students, this ratio because it is always asked in your MCQs in the NEET exam. Now the third type of interaction that we are going to come across is epistasis. So epistasis means the interaction between the inhibiting gene. So simply epistasis means the act of inhibition or the act of stopping. So what do you mean by this epistasis phenomenon? So again, this epistasis is a type of non-allelic interaction. It is the interaction between 2 gene pairs that are present on separate gene loci. So such kind of interactions are your non-allelic interactions. So here, this interaction is taking place between 2 non-allelic genes where one gene pair is going to suppress the action of the other gene pair. So such kind of interactions are called as the epistatic interactions. Now within these epistatic interactions, I have 2 types of gene loci. So first of them is called as the epistatic gene locus, while the second is called as the hypostatic gene locus. So let us understand what do you mean by this epistatic and hypostatic gene locus. So now the gene locus, which is going to suppress or it is not going to allow the expression of the other gene locus, so then this gene locus is called as the epistatic gene locus. So this is that particular gene locus which is going to be dominant and it is not going to allow the expression of the other gene locus present on the other gene loci. So such a dominant gene loci which is always going to get expressed is called as the epistatic gene or the epistatic gene locus. Now, the other gene locus which is not going to get expressed, which is always going to be suppressed or it is prevented from being expressed, such a gene locus is called as the hypostatic gene locus. So when the epistatic gene locus is going to get expressed, the hypostatic gene locus will not be allowed to express. So this is basically the phenomenon of epistasis. Now, depending on the epistasis type, you have 2 different categories. So one is the dominant epistasis while the other is the recessive epistasis. So let us understand these 2 types. So first is the dominant epistasis. So remember students, the ratio of dominant epistasis is 12:3:1. Usually it is all again asked in your MCQs. Now, how do you understand what is dominant epistasis? So simply break down the word. The first word is dominant and the second is epistasis. So what do you mean by dominant epistasis? So here the dominant allele of my epistatic locus is going to play a very important role such that this dominant allele is going to control and mask the expression of my hypostatic locus. The dominant allele will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus, irrespective of whether whatever condition the hypostatic locus is in. The dominant allele will not allow its expression. However, when instead of the dominant allele at the epistatic locus, I have the recessive allele, then and then only my hypostatic locus will be expressed. So if my dominant allele is present at the epistatic locus, the hypostatic locus will not be expressed. However, instead of the dominant allele, now if there is a recessive genotype present at the epistatic locus, then and then only my hypostatic locus will be allowed to express. Then and then only there will be a chance for hypostatic locus to be expressed. So let us understand dominant epistasis in better details with the help of an example. So dominant epistasis is usually observed in dogs. So in dogs, the coat color is under control of two hypothetical gene pairs. So what are these gene pairs? So gene pair number 1 is capital I small I, and gene pair number 2 is capital B small b. So both these gene pairs, they are present on separate gene loci, and one of them is the epistatic locus while the other of them is the hypostatic locus. So here the epistatic locus is represented as capital I small I, while my hypostatic locus is capital B small b. So if you are following epistasis, you all will understand that the epistatic locus will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus. So now, what is the dominant allele that is going to come into picture? So the dominant allele of the epistatic locus is going to be capital I. So when this capital I is going to be expressed, it will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus in whatever condition it is. So if my epistatic locus is expressed as capital I in homozygous dominant condition, then again the hypostatic locus will not be expressed. Or either the epistatic locus is going to be capital I in heterozygous condition, then also the hypostatic locus will not be expressed. So in that cases, the capital I allele will express itself, and the coat color that you will observe in the dogs is going to be a default white coat color. So the dominant trait over here is the white coat color from the epistatic locus. Now, instead of my dominant allele capital I, now my epistatic locus is representing the recessive alleles, small I. Once the recessive alleles are observed or expressed in the epistatic locus, then and then only my hypostatic locus will be expressed in whatever condition it is. So let us go to my hypostatic locus. So here the hypostatic locus has two alleles, capital B and small b. Now if capital B is present in homozygous state, then the coat color that you observe in dogs is going to be a black coat color. So the black color is the trait of the dominant trait that you observe in the dogs. Now if capital B is present in the heterozygous condition where both capital B and small b are present such that capital B is dominant over small b, then the coat color that you get again is going to be a black coat color. However, if the hypostatic locus is represented by two recessive alleles together in homozygous condition, then the phenotype that you get is again a distinct phenotype, that is a brown coat color. So my recessive allele small b is going to contribute a brown pigmentation in dogs. So these are the cases of the dominant epistasis. So now what if two such dogs are crossed with each other or they are mated with each other? So let us see mating between a white dog and a brown dog. So I have a white dog with the genotype capital I, capital B, capital B. So if capital I is present, the default coat color is going to be white because this is my dominant allele at the epistatic locus and will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus. The second dog that we have is the brown dog. The brown color is observed because the epistatic locus shows the recessive alleles and therefore the hypostatic locus is allowed to express. So now I'm going to mate a white dog with a brown dog. So in that case, upon mating, the F1 hybrid that you get is a white coat color. The gametes that are contributed by the parent white dog are capital I and capital B, while the gametes that are contributed by the parent brown dog are the small I and small b. So therefore, these gametes, they interact with each other, and the hybrid that is produced is a heterozygous individual. So this is said to be a double heterozygous individual for capital I as well as capital B. And since capital I is present as a dominant allele, the default coat color is going to be white. So this is my F1 generation. Now, two such F1 hybrids, when are crossed with each other, the phenomenon of self-crossing is going to take place, and the second generation that you'll get is again the F2 generation. So I will have 4 gametes from the first F1 hybrid that are crossed with the 4 gametes of the second F1 hybrid. So these are the 4 gametes of one F1 hybrid, and these are the 4 gametes of the second F1 hybrid. So this is a typical Punnett square, and the crossing once carried out, it's going to again give you 16 combinations. But now here you see that this is a the ratios that you'll obtain over here are slightly different from your typical 9:3:3:1 ratio that you observe in your Mendelian dihybrid cross. There you had obtained 4 different phenotypes, but here you obtain only 3 different phenotypes. So let us see how are these 3 different phenotypes observed. So here you see that the ratio that you obtain is 12 white colored, 3 black coat colored, and 1 brown coat colored. So how are these observed? So the 12 boxes that you see over here that are white colored, here you see that in all these boxes you observe a dominant allele capital I present at the epistatic locus. Therefore, once this dominant allele is present, the coat color is definitely going to be white. It will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus, whatever condition it may be. So here you get a white coat color in 12 offsprings. Now, the second case is where the epistatic locus is expressed by small I. So therefore, now it is going to allow the expression of my hypostatic locus, because my epistatic locus is representing the recessive genotype. So now at my hypostatic locus, I have capital B in homozygous condition or in heterozygous condition. So therefore, capital B is dominant over small b, and therefore it is going to express the black coat color in the dots. And the last case is where at the hypostatic locus, I have the recessive genotype. Therefore, the individual is going to be a brown coat color. So this is going to induce a brown pigmentation. So these are the 3 different cases that you observe in the F2 generation in the ratio 12:3:1, where 12 offsprings are white coat colored, 3 of them are black coat colored, while 1 of them is the brown coat color. So remember students, the ratio, the phenotypic ratio of F2 generation in dominant epistasis is always going to be 12:3:1. So simply remember this kind of crossing so that it will be easier for you all to remember the ratio 12:3:1. For easy understanding, what I usually suggest my students is that what you can do is you can modify the 9:3:1 ratio, where you can simply add up the first 2 digits. So 9:3 summed up to be 12, and the remaining 3:1 remains as it is. So the ratio 9:3:3:1 gets modified to 12:3:1. Okay. Now let us understand the second type of epistatic phenomenon, which is the recessive epistasis. So again, this recessive epistasis again has altogether a different ratio, 9:3:4, where the first 2 digits of Mendelian dihybrid ratio remains as it is, 9:3, while the remaining 2 digits, 3:1, are summed up to form the digit 4. So remember it that way. The recessive epistasis ratio is 9:3:1. So this is for easy remembering. Now let us see how is this ratio deduced. What is this recessive epistasis? So again, you can break down the term recessive and epistasis. So here, now at the epistatic locus, I am going to have a recessive genotype. So the recessive genotype of my epistatic locus is now going to play an important role, and it is going to control and mask the expression of my hypostatic locus. The hypostatic locus will not be allowed to express only and only when the recessive genotype is present at the epistatic locus. Otherwise, in all cases, the hypostatic locus will be expressed. Only and only when the recessive genotype is present, the hypostatic locus will not be allowed to express. So let us understand this with the help of an example. So recessive epistasis is observed in case of mice. So here again, the coat color in mice is under control of two hypothetical gene pairs. So the two gene pairs are capital C small c, that is one gene pair, and the second gene pair is capital A small a. So these two gene pairs are going to control the coat color in mice. So here, one of the gene pairs, capital C small c, that is present on a separate gene loci, is acting as the epistatic locus, while the other gene pair, capital A small a, is acting as the hypostatic locus. So my epistatic locus is not going to allow the expression of the hypostatic locus only and only when I am going to have a recessive genotype. So if there is a recessive genotype at the epistatic locus, the hypostatic locus will not be allowed to express. So consider that I have a recessive phenotype. So there is a double recessive phenotype that you observe at the epistatic locus, and therefore the default phenotype that you observe in mice is the white coat color. So therefore, if you have the genotype small c, there is going to be no pigmentation in mice, and the mice is always going to be white coat color. So no colored pigments are produced, and the mice is said to be an albino mice. However, in other cases where the epistatic locus is occupied by either, say, capital C in homozygous dominant condition or in heterozygous dominant condition, irrespective of the two cases, the hypostatic locus will be allowed to express. So now let us shift on to the hypostatic locus. Upon its expression, what is going to happen? So the hypostatic locus is occupied by two alleles, capital A and small a. So now if capital A is present in homozygous dominant condition, then it is going to produce the agouti trait, which is a pale yellow colored in mice. So this is a dominant trait over the recessive trait, that is small a. So small a is going to produce a black coat color. So when capital A and small a are present together, the capital A is said to be dominant over small a, and it is going to produce an agouti coat color. However, when small a is present in homozygous recessive condition, then it will be expressed and the coat color is going to be black. So these are the cases of recessive epistasis. So let us see if two such mice are crossed with each other. So now here the mating is going to take place between an agouti mice and a Weiss mice. So the agouti mice has a genotype capital C, and capital A. So now since capital C is present at the epistatic locus, the hypostatic locus is allowed to express, and therefore the mice coat color is going to be agouti pale yellow. The second mice that we have is a white colored mice, which is a default coat color at the epistatic locus when it is expressed. So now the epistatic locus has the recessive genotype, and therefore epistatic locus will definitely get expressed and will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus. So the hypostatic locus is not expressed, and the mice coat color is definitely going to be a white one. When two such mice are crossed with each other, then the gametes that are contributed by these mice are, from agouti mice you get a capital C and capital A, while from the white mice you get a small c and a small a. So when all these four gametes are crossed with each other, here you're going to get an F1 hybrid. So this F1 hybrid is said to be a heterozygous individual for both my alleles, capital C and capital A. So this is an agouti coat color, where my hypostatic locus is allowed to express. So when two such F1 hybrids are crossed with each other, then the phenomenon of self-crossing takes place, and here you get an F2 generation. So again, whatever offsprings that you'll get in the F2 generation, the ratios of that offspring will be slight deviation from your Mendelian dihybrid ratios. So here you get that the four gametes that you get from the first F1 hybrid, and these are the four gametes that you get from the second F1 hybrid. So both these F1 hybrids are crossed with each other, and here again you are going to get 16 different genotypic combinations. Now let us see what are the phenotypic combinations. So here you see again the three color coded scheme. So here you see that the ratio of the phenotypes that you get is 9:3:4. So the 9 individuals are going to show an agouti coat color, 3 of them are going to show black coat color, while 4 of them are going to show the white coat color. So if you see in these yellow colored boxes, you see either the capital C is present in either homozygous condition or in the heterozygous condition, like this. So in either of the cases, the epistatic locus will not express, Instead, the hypostatic locus will be expressed. So now the hypostatic locus is going to show either capital A in homozygous dominant condition or in heterozygous condition. So therefore, capital A is by default going to get expressed, and the trait that you'll observe is going to be an agouti coat color. Now, in the second condition that you see is the black coat color. So here also my epistatic locus is occupied by capital C in either homozygous condition or in heterozygous condition. But here the hypostatic locus is occupied by the recessive allele small a. Therefore, small a is going to express itself, and the trait that you get over here is the black coat color. So 3 offsprings are going to show the black coat color. Now the remaining 4 offsprings that you have, in all these 4 offsprings, the epistatic locus is occupied by the recessive genotype. So here you see small c in all the 4 different genotypes. So here the epistatic locus will express itself in the homozygous recessive condition and will not allow the expression of my hypostatic locus in whatever condition it may be. So irrespective of that, my epistatic locus is going to express, and the coat color default is going to be a white coat color. So the 4 mice that are going to produce will be albino mice, and there will be no pigmentation in these mice. So such mice will have white coat color. So ultimately, the phenotypic ratio that you get in the F2 generation will be 9 agouti coat color, 3 black coat color, and 4 of them will be white coat color. So remember, for a recessive epistasis, the ratio is going to be 9:3:4. So these were the few important genetic interactions that we saw. So first we saw lethal genes, where the ratio is always going to be 1:2, or you can either call it as 2:1. Then we saw complementary genes. The ratio of that was 9:7, always remember. And the next one was the dominant epistasis. For that, the ratio was 12:3:1. And the last one was the recessive epistasis, for which the ratio was 9:3:4. So remember all these 4 ratios. These are very important, and they are usually asked in your NEET questions. So thank you so much, students. So if you all have understood my topic, and if I was successful in providing you with insights, please do like my video and subscribe to my channel. If you'll have any queries or any doubts, feel free to mail me on this particular email ID. So thank you and